Talks like an animal, must be an animal. Come hear the animals, talking animals, talking animals.
Good morning. This is Talking Animals on WMNF. I'm Duncan Strauss, and my guest today is Nicci Wright, co-founder and co-chairperson of the African Pangolin Working Group, or APWG. Established in 2011, the APWG is dedicated to protecting and the genuine conservation, not that phony zoo conservation stuff, of the pangolin, the world's most trafficked animal, topping even elephants and rhinos in that regard. A somewhat obscure animal, the pangolin has become more widely familiar in the wake of Pangolin, Kulu's Journey, a Netflix documentary released earlier this year, directed by Pippa Ehrlich, co-director of the 2020 doc My Octopus Teacher, chronicling the story of an APWG volunteer, Gareth Thomas, who rescues, rehabilitates, and releases a trafficked baby pangolin. As the film unspools, a few experts, including Nicci Wright, weigh in on the pangolin's plight and the challenges faced in rehabilitating rescued pangolins to the degree they can be liberated back into the wild. A striking creature, vaguely prehistoric looking, the pangolin is the only mammal covered in scales and further distinguishes itself by walking upright on its hind feet, enhancing the dinosaur image. At the same time, pangolins are more than a little charismatic, some might even say cute. Of course, that distinctive appearance partly accounts for the animal's serious ongoing peril. They're poached chiefly for their scales as well as for their meat. We'll discuss with Wright APWG's efforts to help mitigate that illegal trade, as well as preparing to release trafficked pangolins back into the wild. We'll also touch on the pangolin, the Kulu's Journey, the Netflix doc, and more when I speak with Nicci Wright in just a moment here on Talking Animals on WMNF. Also coming up later on today's show, I'll talk with George L. Heinrich, a field biologist and environmental educator specializing in Florida reptiles. Heinrich is slated to deliver a presentation entitled Why Snakes Are Cool this Saturday, July 12th at Brooker Creek Preserve Environmental Education Center in Tarpon Springs. After the lecture itself is complete, some live snakes will be available for viewing and handling if those attending choose to do so. More about this serpent-minded presentation when I speak with George L. Heinrich later in today's show. Right now, though, let's talk pangolins with Nicci Wright, with a reminder that I invite you to join the conversation by calling 813-239-9663, emailing dj@wmnf.org, or texting 813-433-0885. Let's welcome Nicci Wright to Talking Animals on WMNF. Good morning, Nicci.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for having me, Duncan.
Thanks for joining us today on Talking Animals. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to discussing the African Pangolin Working Group and, of course, pangolins themselves. But first, if okay, I'd like to ask about your very earliest experiences with pangolin yourself.
The first time I had a pangolin put into my hands was in 2008. I was running a wildlife rehabilitation center where we dealt with all indigenous wildlife here in South Africa. And somebody brought this sack in, and when we opened it up, there was a pangolin inside it. And that was the first one I'd ever seen and the first one I'd ever dealt with.
And what was your reaction once you saw what was inside the sack?
I was speechless. I was just utterly amazed. I mean, it's like looking at a dinosaur. It's totally out of any context. You know, it's not a bird, it's not a reptile. It is a mammal, but it doesn't look like a mammal at first. You know, until you get used to them. And also, I had no context for how to look after it, how to care for it, how to rehabilitate it. Nothing at all. So we hit the ground running, as they say, and we had to learn fast.
So how did you just try to piece it together, teach yourself along the way, or how did I mean, that sounds like kind of a daunting task, especially with an animal so unusual looking and fragile in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it involved a lot of reaching out to one or two people only at that time who knew anything about pangolins at all. And trying to do as much research as I could in a very short space of time, finding out what its behavior was, what they eat, how to care for it, what it needed, because you want to when you're rehabbing an animal, you need them to be as comfortable and as stress-free as possible. So you need to provide them with whatever it is that they need, and will make them feel comfortable. But the other tricky thing about pangolins, which we learnt, down the line, is that they don't eat in captivity. So the species that we deal with here in South Africa is the Temminck's pangolin, and you can't give them a plate of ants. And even if you could, they wouldn't eat them because they're just too stressed. So we had to devise a way around that, which we've done pretty successfully.
Yeah, well, obviously we'll delve into that, but it sounds super complicated, and like you just had to kind of keep traveling, kind of your own learning curve with that very first pangolin that was handed to you in that sack.
Yeah, exactly, and also just using your instinct, and just trying to do the best. I mean, it's a huge responsibility. But as time went on, obviously that responsibility was shared because more and more people have got involved with pangolin, and now there are vets that specialize in them. And, in those early days, we didn't even know where to take blood out of a pangolin. It wasn't like any other mammal the vets had dealt with.
And where do you take blood out of a pangolin, just for future reference?
Just in case you need to know. Right. They have a ventral vein underneath their tail. So if they're lying on their back, at the very top of their tail, they have not the tip, the other end. There's a big ventral vein there which you can take blood out of. But that's only if the pangolin has been sedated first, because otherwise they roll into a ball.
And they don't cooperate probably with that.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want needles stuck in them.
So when you got that pangolin in the sack, I'm trying to get a sense of a timeline here. When did pangolins sort of become an important topic in the way that we're talking about today? But I'm just trying to think how far, like prior to you getting that pangolin, was there discussion of pangolins? Was there concern? Was there anything resembling the crisis that later unfolded? Or I'm just trying to place it in context and timeline, if you could.
There hadn't been much discussion about pangolins being vulnerable, in terms of the trade. There was one chap, Darren Peterson, who was doing his master's degree in the Kalahari Desert on pangolins, just because they were an interesting and little known animal. Mm-hmm. And then there was another rehab facility in Zimbabwe called Tiki Highwood Trust, and they had their first pangolin in 1999, so they had more experience, and that was all I knew. And then as time went on, over the years, the next couple of years, we got a couple more in, and then another couple more in, and when I was releasing them at this particular reserve, I was chatting to the conservationists there at the reserve and saying, I've just got this horrible feeling that something's going on with pangolins. We're seeing them more and more on the local trade in South Africa. There's something going on, and I think we need to do something about it. And then Prof. Ray Janssen, who founded the African Pangolin Working Group, had come to that reserve to pick up a sample, and he was saying the same thing to the same people. And then finally he and I met, and we decided that there should be something done about it, just in case, just so that we were prepared. And in 2011, the African Pangolin Working Group was founded. And
by you and Ray, it sounds like.
Ray, yes, and a couple of other people. Mm-hmm. The initial meeting was held at the Lapalala Reserve in 2011, and that founded the working group.
So it sounds like at that point, if I follow you, Nicci, there was some troubling indications, but things weren't like dark or hadn't turned. We weren't anywhere near crisis territory. It just sounded like sort of the prelude to one.
That's right. Yes, we had strong feelings that there was something going on. We didn't know what it was exactly. We knew pangolins were being poached, but we had no idea as to the extent. And we knew that they were being used as bushmeat further up throughout Africa, in West Africa and Central Africa, but again had no idea as to the extent. And it was only in the sort of coming years as more and more research was done, and then in 2012, the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group was kind of reformed, and that's when I think it was reformed with maybe about 20 or 30 people as members. It now has just on 200 members, I think.
Wow.
And so there are a lot more people doing a lot more work, you know, as we began to realize the full extent of the crisis that pangolins worldwide, you know, in Asia and in Africa were facing. More and more people came together to try and do something about it.
Yeah, it's sort of that classic thing. It sounds like especially like when you and Ray first met, I mean, people were doing stuff kind of in their own sort of isolated way as much as they were doing, whether it's research or helping them. But no one was, at that moment, was necessarily talking to each other about their own experiences and seeing how much there were universal experiences. And then I guess
that's right.
When the African Pangolin Working Group formed, that probably provided an opportunity to do much more of that kind of comparing of notes and communicating and saying, hey, there's this over here as well that I didn't know about yesterday, but you told me about. And that's exactly how it unfolded. And I think the African Pangolin Working Group is one of the first 4 groups globally that was formed specifically for pangolins. So we were there right at the beginning, and have sort of watched it all unfold as it has. And what exactly happened in those? Once you and Ray and a few others put it together, what happened initially? What were kind of the first steps that you said? Okay, now we've got this sort of coalition, I guess. What should we do to be most effective on the behalf of pangolins? What were those initial days and steps looking like?
Well, under the brilliant leadership of Professor Ray Jansen, who's obviously an academic, he got various students writing papers and researching different aspects of pangolins to establish kind of where we were and what was going on with local cultural beliefs and with belief systems up in West Africa and that kind of thing. And then also started to look at the law enforcement and the laws that in South Africa, at least, that affected or protected pangolins. And then Ray began to get involved with the actual sting operations of that retrieved pangolins off the trade. We started to put together workshops which trained law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and magistrates to just bring pangolins to their immediate attention, and so that they had some understanding. You know, when a guy would come into their sort of rural courthouse somewhere and was being charged with possessing this very odd animal that nobody had heard about, they needed to know exactly what laws protected that animal. And in actual fact, in South Africa, pangolins are more highly protected than rhino, which is something that not many people know. And the reason for that is because...
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I find that, as I'm sure many people do, very surprising given what we otherwise know about how heavily trafficked they are.
About how heavily trafficked rhino are?
No, about how heavily trafficked pangolin. Just the fact that pangolins are better protections in place. You know, to those who don't know much about this world, it seems counterintuitive.
It is, isn't it? Exactly. And that also became... entrenched in legislation in 2016 when Johannesburg hosted CITES. And pangolins were uplisted from Appendix 2, which allowed some trade in whatever species it was, rhino or pangolins or whatever. They were uplisted to Appendix 1, which prevents or prohibits any trade whatsoever. So that was just an added layer, whereas rhino in South Africa, you are allowed to trade rhino. You can buy and sell rhino between game reserves. So not that, as you say, not that it's helped on a global scale, but at least we know that pangolins have got our law behind them here in South Africa.
Yeah, I guess the tricky thing that you find in so many situations is the enforcement. It's great if certain laws are in place to protect them, but depending on how they're enforced and how readily they're enforced and actively,
exactly,
and what the results are. So I'm guessing enforcement is not strong and consistent.
Well, it is here in South Africa. I mean, here in South Africa, we've had multiple sentences passed down of 10 years and 8 years, 7 years, that kind of thing, which has been remarkable.
Yeah.
But so in South Africa, it's pretty consistent, even though the trafficking and the poaching continues. But throughout Africa, and I think one of the main reasons for that is the fact that we've highlighted pangolins as much as we possibly can, and that we've been doing these, numerous training workshops all around our country to just involve police, to involve all the different law enforcement agencies, and provide them with posters for their police stations, and to give them contacts and to show them which laws are involved and all that kind of stuff, and to support them, essentially. That's what we're here for. So I think that is really, really working in South Africa.
Good. So you feel optimistic in that regard?
I think so, yes. And I think also the difference is also with the pangolin, when the law enforcement agencies recover a pangolin, generally the pangolin is still alive. So they keep them alive because they can't facilitate a dead pangolin. They don't have refrigeration. So they keep them alive. And even though sometimes they've been alive in a sack for 2 weeks and they're very, very compromised, the animal is still alive. It's not like recovering a rhino horn or an elephant tusk, where you know for sure that animal is dead. It's been killed, it's been poached.
Yeah. So
with the alive pangolin, the police are very invested, and they race it through to the closest veterinarian who's trained to deal with pangolin. And they're very invested, and we generally like to, give the investigating officer feedback and photographs and, a little video clip of the pangolin feeding, and that keeps them all invested, and it just helps them. I mean, these guys do a very difficult job.
Sure.
With everything that they've got to deal with, and I think it really just inspires them.
Well, I'm sure, and I would think that many people, no matter how busy they are or hardened they are or whatever, can't help but be struck by the pangolin that comes in that day in that sack, especially if it's been in traffickers' hands for
exactly
a week or two.
Exactly, and then the other thing we like to do is offer that investigating officer the opportunity to name that pangolin. So we get pangolins named after wives and girlfriends and children and all kinds of things. But it really just keeps that team invested in what they're doing.
For sure, there's more of a connection that way. If it's like, hey, that pangolin's named after my wife, I care that much more about what the status of that pangolin is and what's happening next.
Exactly. And we just feel like it creates a link to us as well, and it's important.
For sure. Well, in case people may have tuned in a bit late, let me let them know this is Talking Animals on WMNF. I'm Duncan Strauss. If you did just tune in, my guest is Nicci Wright, co-founder of the African Pangolin Working Group, dedicated to the protection and the conservation of the pangolin. That's the world's most trafficked animal beyond rhinos, elephants, etc. So the pangolin has become more widely familiar recently, I'd like to think, in the wake of Pangolin Kulu's Journey, a Netflix documentary released earlier this year. If you'd like to ask Nicci a question about the pangolin or offer a comment about them, please call 813-239-9663, email dj@wmnf.org, or text 813-433-0885. So, At this point, Nicci, I mean, a couple of things I'm struck by is, I mentioned earlier, I didn't really have a sense of a timeline, but as you've described some of these things, good and not so good that have happened, it seems like it's all within a very short period of time that, from when you were first handed that sack and eventually met up with Ray and you guys and others formed the group. And when people started to notice there was illicit activity happening, that's all like in 20 years' time, give or take, right?
Yeah. It has been a short period of time. And we've managed to get a surprising amount done, although there are many times where we don't feel like it's nearly enough, of course. For sure.
Well, so maybe I can, at this point, ask you to offer sort of a brief tutorial. Let's call it Pangolin 101. I mean, you and your APWG colleagues are obviously steeped in the pangolin world, but many folks listening to the show may be wholly unfamiliar with these animals. So what would you consider the fundamental elements someone relatively new to pangolin should understand about these animals and maybe more to the point, their plight?
Okay. Pangolins, and there are 4 species in Africa and 4 species in Asia. The Asian pangolins have been hugely depleted due to the Asian demand and traditional medicine beliefs.
So they're poached as heavily as the African counterparts?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah,
yes,
sounds like maybe more so.
Yeah, well, more so, I would say. And then of course it's come across to Africa. And ton loads of pangolin scales have left Africa destined for Asia. Literally, hundreds of thousands of animals. And these little animals are nocturnal, generally. They are quite territorial, so they each have their little territories. And they eat ants and termites.
And they're
shy.
Right?
That's it. They don't eat anything else. They eat ants and termites. We've got 2 species in Africa which are arboreal. The white-bellied and the black-bellied pangolins, which you find up in the forests of Central and West Africa. The black-bellied pangolin is a beautiful sort of black and tan jewel of an animal. And then you've got the giant pangolin, which is more in Central Africa, which can weigh up to 38 kgs. And then we've got the Temminck's pangolin, which is the one that we mainly deal with in South Africa. And they're bipedal, meaning they walk on their 2 hind feet.
Yeah.
So their tail and their front quarters are sort of counterbalance, and they plod along, and they've got this incredibly sensitive sense of smell, and they plod along sniffing the ground until they find ants, and they'll put this long tongue that they have, long sticky tongue, into the ant holes or into a termite mound and slurp up ants and termites by the thousand, and that's what keeps them alive. And they have hard overlapping scales which are made of keratin, the same as rhino horn and our fingernails. And when they're threatened, they'll roll into a ball. And they've got such incredible core strength that you cannot open them up. I've never been able to open up a pangolin unless it's very, very weak. But even, adult lion, there have been stories of half-grown lions playing with an adult pangolin for up to 4 hours. They're just investigating it, and they cannot get it open.
Wow.
So incredibly strong. They've been on the planet for 85 million years, and they're leaving it before our very eyes.
Yeah. And it sounds like, as we talked about just a moment ago, it's moving swiftly, this unfortunate process.
It has been.
And is it just the Temminck's that tends to walk on the 2 hind feet?
Yes, that's the only bipedal pangolin. So it looks like a little mini T-Rex.
Yeah.
In fact, they were on the planet at the same time as the dinosaurs, which is incredible.
It really is. Wow.
Yeah.
So, they've survived this long. Let's keep them going. Jeez.
Exactly. They're like this precious, creature that we definitely need to keep going. I mean, how dare we allow it to be lost,
For sure. No, well, it sounds like you and your colleagues are doing everything you can to...
Trying.
Yeah. Well, so, in fact, the core element of APWG's work appears to be the rehabilitation and rewilding after rescue or coming into possession of a given pangolin, rescued typically from the illegal wildlife trade. So the Netflix doc that I've alluded to, Pangolin Kulu's Journey, offers kind of a classic, or what would appear to be a classic case study of this enterprise as APWG's ambassador Gareth Thomas works on rehabilitating and releasing Kulu into the wild. For those who haven't yet had a chance to see the film, can you describe just basically, in maybe broad strokes, how that rehabilitation and release process tends to work with pangolin in that situation?
Yeah. Well, over the years, we've discovered, we've put a protocol together for releasing pangolins that have come off the trade because they definitely need a veterinary treatment and assessment. And then when they're deemed fit enough by the vet, they need to go into a rehabilitation process. And that involves sort of getting them used to a new area because we don't know where they've come from originally. And as I said earlier, they're territorial. So you need to be very careful about putting them back into the correct area where they've got ants and termites species that particular pangolin likes, because they don't all like all the different ants and termites. And then just monitoring them post-release through telemetry that we attach to their scales to make sure that they are eating enough and that they have settled and that they aren't being displaced by any pangolins that are already living in that area. So it's quite a long process, and it can go on for up to a year, especially if the pangolin is a youngster like Kulu was, who was he hadn't reached the optimum weight.
Yeah, I was struck by...
To release.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say I was struck in the film how that's absolutely a pivotal element of rehabilitating and releasing, and when a pangolin is actually ready to be released, it's always about monitoring their weight. And is that because of the focus, the narrow focus of their diet being just ants and termites? So if they're not getting enough of those, their weight isn't building up, and so they probably wouldn't be strong enough and fierce enough out in the wild to function.
That's right, yeah. So given that they only eat ants and termites, they need to put on weight every time they go out and feed, and they need to put on enough weight. So over the years, we've kind of managed to narrow that down to sort of a good guideline. And we've decided that 6.5 kilograms is a good weight for a young pangolin to reach to be released. They're deemed strong enough then to be able to withstand any kind of predatory attack by any other animal, like a honey badger or a leopard or a lion. And they also are big enough to be able to sort of have the telemetry placed on them and be monitored then in their release process. So if you get a big adult pangolin of 12 kgs, you won't need to keep them for that long, but you'll still need to do, because they're big enough, their weight is good enough. And if they're healthy, then they get released with their telemetry, and you make sure they're settled into an area and then can take the tags off and they be deemed released. But with somebody who is young, like Kulu, he's got to be fed, be walked every day to feed, and you've got to just keep monitoring that weight going up and up and up and up until he's at the optimum release weight, which was 6.5 kgs, which is why in the movie, some people afterwards commented on that there was a lot of handling. Well, the handling was because he had to be picked up and weighed and then brought back because he wasn't released yet. So you're managing him, in a sense, every day until that 6.5 kg mark. And then he could go into his slow release process. Then he was moved into a different area of the reserve, and he was spent time in that area, make sure that he got used to that area. He knew where all the burrows were. He knew where all the food, ants and termites was. He knew where water was, that kind of thing. And then there's just like a subtle kind of settling that you pick up when you know the animal well. And that was the time that he was released.
And I guess the concerns about being handled as represented in the film were, if I follow you, were probably more a product of how young Kulu was when he sort of began the journey, and so that just maybe naturally required a bit more handling and kind of direction in terms of the rehab and release part of his story.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Duncan. I mean, he's a young animal, and even Pang, he's a mammal, so he does need guidance, and he does need. I've raised pangolins where they're actually looking for affection, and they're looking to cuddle because they're just baby mammals, and they're not with their own mothers. So you have to give them what they need in order for them to become a fully functioning, and balanced animal in the end when they get released. And also remembering they've all been through horrific poaching incidences. So Kulu was probably still with his mum when he was poached. He maybe was just at the age where he was starting to come out of the burrow a little bit on his own and potter around, a meter or so away from the burrow. And maybe that's when he was poached. So he's gone through that horrible incident, and he's also separated abruptly from his mother. And those things all need to be addressed when you're doing the rehabilitation of any species, but including pangolin.
Yeah, it sounds like there's one or more sources of trauma that is part of the picture often for those pangolins. And I guess in most cases, people that are doing the kind of work you and others are doing to try to rehabilitate and release them don't necessarily know what that story is. I mean, they know they've been separated from their mother probably, but what else went on during the actual poaching or trafficking, whatever. That has to, I guess, be sorted out just by spending time with that animal and kind of seeing how they react to certain things and just other, I guess, signs that people that have been doing this a long time like you have just probably are attuned to.
You're absolutely right, Duncan. And it's just spending time with each animal. You get to kind of pick up what their needs are when you know the species well, and when you know what their normal behavior would be. And when you see how they're reacting to different things, because they all actually suffer from a degree of PTSD. So, I mean, like rhino calves, for instance, that have watched their mums being shot and they're, caught and brought back to a rhino orphanage, they all have PTSD as well. So it could be from different voices, it could be from different smells, it could be from smelling a cigarette smoke, which will send them straight back to that incident and put them into a high degree of stress. So pangolins are the same, and we've got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's tricky because you're only going to discover where the core problem is once it's triggered or re-triggered by something unknowingly that you or someone else that's trying to help rehabilitate and release that pangolin, and just something happened that evokes what happened when they were removed from their mother or trafficked or both. And and all of a sudden you're deep into it, but you had no idea what was coming from 2 seconds ago.
Yeah. It is tricky. Sometimes you're kind of groping in the dark, and that's you're dealing with the behavioral stuff, but you also have all the veterinary stuff that goes on, and they're very unusual animals for vets to treat. They're quite different to other mammals in the way that they respond to things. So for the vets, it's been challenging, this journey with pangolins for the treatment of them. But it's been a journey of discovery, for everybody involved with pangolins, and the only way through it all is to collaborate and to do training and to share and to collaborate with others through groups like the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group, through the APWG's work, and also hopefully through allowing films like Kulu's Journey to highlight pangolins in general to everybody, so that everybody who's touched by it and wants to help can do so. There's a vehicle.
Yeah, for sure. So that kind of reminded me that you and obviously some of your APWG colleagues are featured in Clueless Journey, starting with Gareth Thomas, who's, of course, bringing that the pangolin back. What kind of impact can a film like Clueless Journey have on APWG and other work that's being done? I mean, it's probably hard to measure or quantify exactly, but I would think for your efforts in raising awareness and education and for sharing information amongst people that are, connected to the same mission, this documentary would I guess would have been a giant boost, and maybe still is.
Well, apart from being fairly terrifying to be out there when you know how many millions of viewers there are potentially through Netflix, it's, for a bunch of people who are essentially quite introverted, that was quite terrifying. But I think the main thing has been that it's an incredible tool for not only the APWG, but for groups that work with pangolins across the world, up through Africa and in Asia, to use something like this film as a tool for their own organization's awareness and to bring awareness to the work that they do. And every single one of them need awareness brought to them as well. And I think that's where the power is.
So would you say that you and your APWG colleagues and others were pleased with the Clueless Journey? I mean, sometimes people will help or cooperate or even, do on-camera interviews with a project about a certain animal welfare issue or animal, and then later they say, hey, they got it just right, or later they say, oh, wow, how did they screw this up? And there's all kinds of reactions in between. So how would you characterize the reaction you and your colleagues had?
I think generally, and I haven't looked at a lot. I know there have been other people involved with the movie that have watched the ratings and the critics and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've just kind of kept my head down, but I think generally it's been well received. I think the way that the movie has been shot. I mean, Pippa Ehrlich is a master. It's been so beautifully filmed and put together and edited, and the music is so evocative. I mean, I find it very, very moving, just the music. And to watch this incredible animal where she's brought in elements of the cultural importance of the animal, throughout Africa and just the emotion that has evoked.
Yeah.
I think is incredibly powerful and moving. If it just touches people enough to understand a little bit more about this incredible animal that, as I say, walked the planet with the dinosaurs, then and motivated them to do something, that's fantastic. We've been getting letters from children in the States and in the UK and Europe and Australia, which are so moving. Those are the kind of things that I find very, very important. Because you're touching the next generation and you're motivating them. There are children all over the place doing projects on pangolins now and bringing it into their classrooms, and so it's like a network that keeps on touching the next level, which I find incredible. As well as going the other way, where pangolin organizations, including the APWG, have benefited through, being able to do interviews and being able to talk to people and present our work to more people in more areas, and also receive donations, which keep us going on the ground. That's
great. No, it sounds like it's been really positive in just about every respect. Sounds like. And especially spawning another generation or two that knows about pangolins and cares about pangolins. And, as I said at the introduction, I mean, I don't know if everybody finds this, but I find them super charismatic and in their own specific ways cute. So I don't know if that figures into some of the school kids' reaction or not, but it's hard not to respond to an animal that looks like that, and especially if you hear any part of their story.
Yeah. I think also Kulu is a personality, and his story, touches on all the different things, aspects around pangolins and what they're facing and how difficult it is. But it also brings across that this funny little animal that you might see on the news or in a magazine or on the TV is actually somebody with its own personality, and they all have their own personalities, each and every pangolin, and that's also incredible. So that brings home to people in all sorts of places, apartments in New York and rural farms in Germany, wherever people are. They'll realize that a pangolin, is a cute, important animal which also has a personality.
For sure. Well, again, we're in our final moments, Nicci. This is Talking Animals on WNF. I'm Duncan Strauss. My guest is Nicci Wright, co-founder of the African Pangolin Working Group, dedicated to the protection and the conservation of the pangolin, which, as we've heard, is the world's most trafficked animal. In our last moment or two, if you'd like to ask Nicci a question or offer a comment, 813-239-9663. You can email dj@wmnf.org. So one thing you said that I thought was kind of interesting is that you and your colleagues tend to be introverted types. Is that kind of like the profile of a pangolin rescuer, rehabilitator, releaser, etc.?
I think it's the profile of people who work with animals and suddenly find themselves having to deal with people as well and learn skills that they may not have had originally. So I think that's what it is, really, Duncan.
I see.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, lastly, what do you think the future holds for the pangolins with everything that's been going on in recent years and stuff like the film and just the amount of experience and knowledge that you and others have accumulated just by virtue of doing this over the years and keep doing it and sharing information which wasn't happening initially? I mean, what do you have a level of optimism that you could pinpoint?
We have to have optimism and we have to have hope to continue. And I think, as I've said before, the more people that are involved, the more people that are aware, the more collaboration that goes on, from just people in the street to scientists to veterinarians, right across the board and across the world. The more that goes on, the more hope there is for pangolins, continuing to remain on the planet.
All right. Well, that's my kind of optimism. I like it. That might be just the perfect point at which to leave this. So, we've been speaking with Nicci Wright from the African Pangolin Working Group. The website is africanpangolin.org. You can find out more about their work and all the kind of things they do, and support their efforts if you're so inclined, and just get a little more steeped in the pangolin world. So hopefully we did that briefly, at least today. Nicci, thank you so much for making the time to join us today on Talking Animals and for all your great work helping our pangolin friends.
It's our honor to do it, Duncan, and thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. In a moment, I'll speak with field biologist and reptile expert George L. Heinrich about the lecture he'll be presenting this Saturday, July 12th at Brooker Creek Preserve Environmental Education Center. It's called Why Snakes Are Cool, and the presentation will include some actual snakes as well. We'll hear more about that in just a moment on Talking Animals on WNF. Right now, we're going to step into the Comedy Corner with a piece from Max Rosenblum called Dog People in today's Comedy Corner on Talking Animals on WNF.
I don't know if any of you are dog people. I feel like you're not a dog person unless you bring your dog in to bring your kid to work day. That's when you know you're a dog person. My coworker Jackie loves dogs. She came into work one day, 9 a.m., burst through the door. She's like, Max, you wouldn't believe it. I was out walking Sadie last night, and someone was walking their cat. Someone was walking their cat. And I was like, okay, to be fair, that is unusual. But I find it hilarious that people scoff at the idea of people treating their cats like dogs. but they have no problem at all treating their dogs like humans. Do you know what I mean? It's like, where do you get off being like, I'm sorry, are you walking your cat right now? My dog cannot enjoy his brunch while you're walking your cat right now. It is so distracting. My fully clothed dog cannot enjoy his mimosa with your cat on a leash. You guys have been wonderful. My name is Max Rosenblum.
That was Max Rosenblum in today's Comedy Corner with a piece called Dog People, taken from an online stand-up appearances of Max's. Now it's time to talk with field biologist and reptile expert George L. Heinrich about the lecture he'll be presenting this Saturday, July 12th at Brooker Creek Preserve Environmental Education Center. Let's hear more about that by welcoming George himself. George Heinrich back to Talking Animals on WNO. Good morning, George.
Hi, Duncan. Glad to be back visiting.
Me too. I'm glad to have you back. And so I was thinking this morning, you wear many hats, including giving talks like this one, running summer camps, leading a turtle organization, and so on. So before we get into Saturday's lecture, maybe you could briefly touch on those other hats and just, give a little moment or two for all the various things you do in that world.
Sure. Well, I'm a wildlife biologist and an environmental educator, so I divide my time between teaching summer camps for kids and workshops and staff training at different preserves for adults, educators, naturalists, and land managers, and also as a field biologist studying 3 different species of turtles and working on conservation plans for a couple species in the Tampa Bay region. But this weekend I'll be doing a program at Brooker Creek Preserve on why snakes are cool.
All right, well, we're sort of naturally headed into that, so I'll bite. Why are snakes cool?
Well, they play really important roles as predators and prey, quite diverse in size and habitats they live in and diets, which are quite different from species to species. So lots of diversity and variety that's out there.
And is that more pronounced in Florida, would you say?
Depends where you are. Different habitats support different species, but we've got about, I think, 46 species in Florida. Maybe 30 of them or so occur in the Tampa Bay region.
Wow.
Small number, only 6 in Florida are venomous, and only 3 of those or 4 of those, I guess, are found in the Tampa Bay region. A couple rattlesnakes and coral snakes and cottonmouths, or what some people refer to as water moccasins.
Right. Well, so where would you say this presentation coming up on Saturday, what audience is that sort of best aimed at, would you say?
It's mostly adults, and there are some kids, just a small number, but not tiny ones. I'd say anywhere from 10 up. It's appropriate for
right.
Over 100 people at Brooker.
That's how many you expect, or that's how many you've had?
And that's what we've had in the past. I'm not sure what the count is now, but I expect over 100.
Wow. And how do they register or sign up, or how does someone say, hey, this sounds cool?
Go on the Brooker Creek Preserve website, and there's a sign up, or you could go on Facebook and click into Brooker Creek Preserve from there, but it's just a simple online click and put your name and you're good to go.
Sounds like there's no cost to attend.
They'll just show up.
Yeah. Sounds like there's no cost to attend this lecture.
There's no cost.
That's great.
Free. It's in a nice air-conditioned room, so it's quite comfortable, free of charge. Starts at 10:30 Saturday morning.
That sounds great.
And we'll have some live snakes.
I was just about to ask you about that. Yeah, tell me about the snakes.
We'll bring some live snakes for, it starts with a PowerPoint presentation, but we'll have some live snakes for children and adults as well if they're interested in handling them and learning more about them up close.
That sounds great. And do people tend to, in the past when you've done this kind of lecture, do most people want to get up close and even handle the snakes typically, or
Many do, yes. Some don't want to, and that's okay.
sure?
But the ones that want to have an opportunity to experience them in hand.
Yeah, that probably deepens the.
We've been doing these for years.
For sure.
And here at Brooker, the program is supported by the Friends of Brooker Creek Preserve, which is the non-governmental support organization for Brooker Creek Preserve.
And if someone, George, had conflicting plans this Saturday, they're just hearing about it and they say, oh, I got this other thing going on, or I got a wedding, or I'm doing whatever they're doing. When's the next time this lecture might be offered, or another lecture that you're offering instead?
Generally, we do it every summer.
Okay.
So this week I'm teaching a herpetology camp for 7 to 11 years old at Brooker. And we always do it the Saturday that camp ends, since the animals are already here.
Okay.
So it's once a year at Wheaton and once a year at Brooker in the summer. Occasionally other stuff gets scheduled, but those are regulars.
Yeah.
And I think from what I hear from people, they have a good time learning about snakes and snake safety, which we go through, how to be safe around snakes and how to be safe when you're in the woods, how to identify venomous snakes. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it sounds like other people have looked forward to it. If you had upwards of 100 people at that thing, that sounds like that's a popular lecture for sure. So.
Yep, that's what I'm told by the county staff.
All right. Well, great. Well, we'll hope it's at least as popular this time around, and we appreciate you taking a moment to give us a bit of a sneak preview of it. And I'm sure we'll talk reptiles and or other things in the future about one thing or another.
I hope so.
Yeah,
thanks
me
for
too.
The opportunity, Duncan.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it too, George. So thanks for your great work, and thanks for joining us today on Talking Animals.
Sure. Well, take care.
You too. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now. Coming up on WMNF, it's The Conversation, the great show hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. After that, it's The Scoop, WMNF's brief news clip. Then we shift back into music program with Sam Ball holding forth from 1 to 3. Patty Metz will be sitting in for Nancy C. this afternoon, hosting the Traffic Jam from 3 to 6 p.m. Then it's John DeBrule with Sound Safari, followed by Step Outside, 8 to 10 p.m. And much more good, fantastic programming after that here on 88.5 WMNF. So, meanwhile, as on this show at the moment, it's the prize for naming that animal. We're offering something fabulous from the Talking Animals Vault to the first person who calls 813-239-9663 and correctly identifies this animal song. It's Name That Animal Tune on Talking Animals on WMNF. If someone can name that animal tune, we'll take that guess probably off the air because we have just about reached the end of today's edition of Talking Animals on WMNF Tampa. I want to thank our guests, Nicci Wright and George L. Heinrich, for joining us today on Talking Animals. Hope you'll join us next Wednesday, July 16th, for another edition of Talking Animals. And you can also visit talkinganimals.net for audio archives, podcasts, etc. of every show we've ever broadcast virtually, and links to our social media pages and more, and a way to sign up for a little weekly newsletter that gives you information about the forthcoming guests and other odds and ends. That's all at talkinganimals.net. I'm Duncan Strauss. Thanks very much for listening. Have a good week. Be kind to animals. Be kind to others. Be kind to yourself. This is Talking Animals on WMNF Tampa, Brandon, Clearwater, Largo, Weehawken, and beyond. Stay tuned for NPR News headlines and the conversation after that, and more good stuff coming on 88.5 WMNF. Thanks. See you next Wednesday. Take care.